far, and giving the perception that his opponents are moving farther than they actually are. With an example being he bends the density of space to become more dense the closer you get to him, to give the illusion that you have traveled farther than in actuality, and so on. There's a lot more to be said about this, but I don't want to get into detail because I sort of disagree with the idea of perception manipulation being what Limitless is. Examples of this being in Gojo versus Jogo. Yeah, really interesting names. Jogo shoots a fire blast that completely surpasses the distance and all around Gojo, yet it doesn't actually touch him specifically. Unless Gojo is giving Jogo's fireballs perception and confusing the perception, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for this to be the case. This also happens whenever Gojo is clearly within an explosion or any type of blast that engulfs his entire body or the entire area, so unless the Gojo we are seeing is an illusion, which doesn't seem to be the case, then it is not perception manipulation. However, that theory isn't technically impossible either. Finally, I'll just tell you all what I believe is the Limitless technique, and it's probably the most simple answer. In the Jujutsu Kaisen movie for Volume 0, we see a Jujutsu sorcerer named Miguel face Gojo, and he explains Gojo's red technique, which you probably learned from Getzo, who is Gojo's basically best friend. And in the manga, he states that Gojo manipulates space on an atomic level, but in the movie adaptation, which many in the JJK fandom consider still canon due to the author's comments on many reasons, Miguel actually says that Gojo manipulates not just space, but Gojo actually manipulates space-time itself, the fabric of our universe. Red is actually an extension of the Limitless, and then uses infinity as an engine, as stated in the Summer Jump special earlier I already mentioned. And if you simply state that he manipulates space-time to actually manipulate the distance between he and his opponents, using theories like Zeno's paradox and so forth, everything begins to make a lot more sense. The way he fights his opponents, warping their bodies, his ability to teleport, his ability to manipulate distance between he and others, the ability to generate infinite information, his ability to remove things from existence with things like purple, and even the ability to float in the air and seemingly remove his mask, all things make much more sense with this concept in mind. This would also explain why Gojo, while trapped in, say, the timeless prison realm, spoiler, can still affect the realm and surprise an extremely intelligent character named Kenjaku and talk while there is no time within it, as he himself can manipulate time and space. Either that, or Gojo can just move without time, and he's just beyond infinitely fast somehow. Anyway, the time-space interpretation also makes much more sense when later characters are stated to manipulate reality in any way they want, such as Takubo's power of comedian, where he can make anything he finds funny literally a reality, and it still would only oppose Gojo, not outright defeat him. The abilities like Red, which Gojo explains as a void in space, and even Hollow Purple, which is based on a negative hollow-looking equation in reality that removes things from existence using imaginary numbers and concepts, also makes much more sense with this. Shonen Jump's objective conclusion at the end of the math segment, without any theories or whatever, their final statement was this: using the Limitless curse technique Red and Blue, Gojo can do conversion and change the scale of distance between him and his opponent. Of course, that is a simple breakdown, but that is what it is basically at the end of the day. Many detractors will try to claim that Gojo only slows people down, which he in fact does. However, also in this special states that it slows them down and then stops them as well. Due to these space-time manipulations and highly likely theories of how infinity works, Kakashi would more than likely never just be able to say simply punch Gojo in the face like you could to Zeno after he told you his tortoise paradox. So does this mean Kakashi can't beat Gojo? No. This is actually where the real fight would then begin, the battle of the Mangekyo Sharingan versus the Six Eyes. If Kakashi was ever unable to touch Gojo with conventional attacks and Gojo is even remotely powerful enough to damage or put Kakashi on guard, he would undoubtedly resort to using his ocular jutsu Kamui, eventually with dual Mangekyo Kakashi resorting to the Kamui Shuriken and Kamui Raikiri respectively. Some people believe that if a character can move at light speed that they can actually bypass Gojo's Limitless, since Gojo manipulates space and time on an atomic level and light is made of photons, which are smaller than the atoms that Gojo is stated to manipulate. The reason this wouldn't work with Kakashi is because even if Kakashi did move at light speed theoretically, he himself is not just photons. He's just moving as fast as light, which would be made of photons. Kind of a argument by the community, but yes, he would still need his Mangekyo powers. The next one is people thinking you can blitz and bypass infinity with speed beyond what it is shown to stop before. However, unfortunately, after Gojo faces Toji, his infinity is usually pretty much always active, and due to the discussion earlier, would just always be warping space around his body to permanently diverge anything that goes through said space to never touch him regardless of finite speed. It's not a speed or reactionary thing, it's just the literal space around him doesn't lead to him in any conventional way. One reason people think this is because when Gojo was initially mastering his Limitless barrier, that he used to distinguish threats of people then act accordingly. However, many JJK fans will currently say that he has a passive barrier that is always active regardless of threat gauge, that he can alter the properties of manually afterward if he has to. He also has a limitless amount of stamina that infinitely regenerates, and thus Limitless is always active. This may sound like I'm giving Gojo a lot of the benefit of the doubt, which I am, to be fair, but this does not mean Kakashi can't win, as I stated earlier, and even if it is all true, and giving both sides the benefit of the doubt and still proving a conclusion makes it much more convincing than if I were to try to downplay Gojo or not give him everything he has, which I'll show you. Anyway, let's get to the actual Mangekyo powers now. Kamui, which is basically Kakashi's ability to rip open a hole in space and time into the Kamui realm, would straight up rip Gojo in half, at least the normal variation of Kamui. And assuming that Gojo we always see as some kind of illusion or something, and Kakashi wouldn't just be like negging an illusion made by infinity, which I would extremely doubt since when he fought Toji and turned off his Limitless curse technique and deactivated infinity, Gojo was still where everyone thought he was, etc. Anyway, Kamui doesn't actually travel to someone, so it wouldn't actually travel through the infinity between him and Gojo. It would actually spawn or just appear on Gojo's body and then just start ripping him in half. You could argue that Kakashi might spawn Kamui on infinity when he's looking at Gojo, since infinity is technically between him and Kakashi at all times. However, due to infinity actually being everywhere at all times, you don't actually perceive or visually see this infinity. Gojo more so manipulates what's always around everyone with a curse technique. So Kakashi would actually see just Gojo, and if he spawned a Kamui, it would spawn on Gojo's body, in which the only way he's surviving it is if he can manipulate the spatial properties of his own body to just sort of negate being spatially warped away, which may be possible, but once again, judging off of that Toji fight, his body seems to actually take damage even after his cursed energy can reactivate, and he doesn't just reform everything in his body normally. It seems like he has to regenerate. So from there, we have to actually gauge the speed of Kamui versus Gojo to make sure he can't just teleport away from it using blue or whatever and run like Deidara did, because if you guys didn't know, Gojo can actually teleport with a hand sign, sort of like flying Raijin, but just by clapping his hands together. If we use the War Art Kakashi's Kamui as an example, and not DMS yet, War Art Kakashi alongside Obito's Kamui, amping the Kamui's speed to 2 times, could react and warp things faster than Ten Tails Madara's True-Seeking Orbs. These True-Seeking Orbs are able to somewhat move comparatively in speed to Might Guy in the 8th Gate and 7th Gate, with characters like Minato, Gaara, Gatedly, and Kakashi somewhat struggling to react to them otherwise, although they could react to them. With all these characters being much faster than the likes of Haku from the Land of Waves, who could fling himself between mirrors at the speed of light, which Guy and Rock Lee also react to during the war, or much faster than Kid Kakashi, who could chop a lightning bolt in half in the middle of the air. The True-Seeking Orb should also be faster than Darwee's Laser Circus, which is literally just light reflecting off of water and then moving through the air, and should be faster than the 4th Raikage and Killer Bee's Lariat, which usually is in base or with a few version 1 one-tailed cloaks, which is stated to move at the speed of light in the databooks. Kakashi also uses this Kamui to rip off Deidara's arm while he's in mid-combat, despite his Kamui being in a much weaker state at the beginning of Shippuden, and is implied to be able to react to Kakuzu's jutsu mid-combat if he had to, and can also react to pain in mid-combat and so forth. It's implied to at least be relative in speed to him at the bare minimum. Jujutsu Kaisen, due to being a newer shonen, doesn't actually have a lot of speed feats, and it actually all clocks in at under the speed of lightning for pretty much everything, which is for the most part slower than Kakashi as a chakra-drained child. This isn't to say that Gojo couldn't be faster, it's just that we don't really know, sort of like a Saitama situation. You just sort of assume he's much faster than what we've seen. Unless you think him reacting to, say, something like Jogo in his domain gives him instantaneous reaction speed, as domains always hit their target pretty much instantly, or you think he has some kind of infinite speed for talking in a realm without time, like the prison realm later. With those, Gojo could easily clap his hands, use time-space manipulation, and then avoid Kamui. Otherwise, he just pretty much gets ripped in two, and that's about that. If Gojo can survive Kamui, he can then activate his own domain expansion called Limitless Void. Limitless Void spawns an orb around its target and is guaranteed to hit its opponent no matter what. It's kind of a point of the versus ability. Inside this domain, Gojo kind of injects the target with multiple different infinities worth of information. That sounds insane, multiple infinities worth, but I'm not actually exaggerating. A good example is, imagine Kakashi saw an apple in his life one time. Instead of seeing this apple or hearing an apple an infinite amount of times, Kakashi would first see, hear, and perceive the letter A from apple infinitely first, then P, then the next P, and then the L, the E, and then apple for infinity, over and over and over again. This happens until the target absorbs so much information that they cannot move and eventually die. A good example of also what this looks like is in 0.2 seconds, the Limitless Void will inject 6 months of information into its target. 0.2 seconds. For reference, remember that the Tsukuyomi in Naruto Part 1 that Itachi used on Kakashi gave him 3 days worth of pain and information, and he was sent to the hospital. Well, I think Tsukuyomi is a little bit stronger than Limitless Void. Limitless Void isn't an illusion and isn't something the Sharingan can simply reflect or ignore. It's actual physical information that is being injected from the universe itself. Also, Itachi did only give Kakashi 3 days of information and was actually trying to spare him and go easy on him. And as we know, Itachi can make you live out your entire life instantly and make you die in an instant. In this case, Gojo is pretty much somewhat similar and can actually give you actual infinities of information you can't just reflect or avoid. Due to this, Gojo would more than likely be able to actually kill Kakashi, at least pre-DMS, with his domain expansion, or pre-Mangekyo Kakashi, especially if Kakashi can't hurt Gojo with conventional attacks and can't land Kamui for whatever reason. It's pretty much guaranteed that Part 1 Kakashi is getting bodied by Gojo. But, as I implied, that is unless you think with DMS or even Mangekyo Sharingan, Kakashi has the mind space and ocular prowess to handle infinite amounts of information. A good example is how Itachi can actually generate that kind of information and tolerate himself using his Mangekyo Sharingan, and with DMS Kakashi easily surpassing Itachi's ocular prowess, and could even potentially surpass or rival the top tiers of the entire Naruto Shippuden verse, like Six Paths Naruto, Renegon Sasuke, Ten Tails of Madara, and etc. He can also spam Kamui and is intangible at will, although his Kamui is more projectile-based with Shuriken, so it's more debatable if it would actually go through infinity just straight up. It's possible he could cut through the manipulated space of Gojo's infinity, however. One last final thing to go over for Kakashi's sake. This mainly would only apply to Part 1 Kakashi, as I mainly discussed the main win con for Kakashi during the War Arc and DMS, which is the premise of this video, is his Mangekyo abilities, his space-time manipulation, and his resistances. But for Part 1 Kakashi, an interesting win con, since he doesn't have Mangekyo abilities, or he does, but he can't necessarily use them since he can barely use his normal Sharingan, is of course his Genjutsu and his ocular Genjutsu abilities. The reason I didn't really talk about this too much, once again, due to the win cons, and also because Genjutsu working on other universes could be its own video topic entirely. Genjutsu either works only on people that are born with a chakra network within them, which is sort of a Naruto exclusive thing. It's almost like a circulatory system, but for chakra within your body that you're born with, that interlinks with all your organs. So even like energy equation wouldn't necessarily give you a chakra network. It's sort of like a biological just difference. But if you were to equate chakra and say cursed energy, and say that Kakashi could use Genjutsu and ocular Genjutsu on someone like Gojo, then you'd be able to say, okay, he could cast illusions on Gojo. And considering that Gojo is sort of a loudmouth and might tell Kakashi how things like infinity works, like he does usually when people are fighting him, he's very like egotistical and almost brags about how his abilities work, then Kakashi, who has an IQ over 200 higher than Shikamaru's in Shippuden, would probably be able to deduce how infinity works, or that Gojo has to activate it, and using his ocular jutsu, which he uses against Zabuza in Land of Waves, he'd be able to hypnotize Gojo into thinking he's using infinity when he's actually not, which is kind of an interesting win con if you think Part 1 Kakashi is strong enough to kill Gojo, as well as the fact if you think ocular jutsu would work on Gojo. As far as we know, Gojo doesn't actually have any illusion or mental mind hacks resistances. He's sort of just a powerhouse no one affects. However, even ocular jutsu and Genjutsu might not work against Gojo if you actually think that infinity would just deflect or block all chakra interference that Kakashi would be sending to Gojo's body. As you know, things like ocular Genjutsu, specifically Mangekyo Genjutsu in the novels, actually injects your chakra into the other person, and if infinity actually determines that as a threat, or Gojo would determine that as a threat, or even if you just say infinity would just do it anyway, then the chakra that is being used during the Genjutsu would never actually reach Gojo's body and would just simply diverge, and even then Genjutsu wouldn't work either. That's why I didn't really bring it up and make it too much of a focus of this video. It's not important really at all. The main win cons are, once again, how fast do you think Gojo is? Do you think Kakashi's Kamui can rip him in half and could bypass infinity? And do you think maybe Gojo has infinite power or something crazy like that? With that, I'll leave it up to you guys. Depends on what speed you think Gojo has. Do you think he reacts to instantaneous attacks in Jogo's domain? Is he moving in a timeless void due to his speed? Do you think Gojo has infinite power due to scaling above Hakari's jackpot, etc., etc.? Do you think the DMS can handle infinite void because of Itachi's Tsukuyomi, which is described as above time and space and all earthly things? Would Kakashi just blitz Kamui destroy Gojo before a fight even began? Etc., etc., etc. Regardless, it's a pretty interesting matchup, and I hope you guys learned something. Personally, I can see why you could argue for either, and I'd love to see what you guys think, as this is probably one of the more interesting and awesome matchups I've had to look into for quite a while, actually. But as a final fun fact for this video, and in fact, might be the most important fact of the video, did you know that Akutami, the author of Jujutsu Kaisen, actually comments on Gojo versus Kakashi? I'm not joking. So the creator of Gojo actually says this. In the JJK fanbook, I often hear people say that it's cool that Gojo has powers like Kakashi-sensei. Well, all I can say to that is that he's not really on the same level as Kakashi-sensei. So this is more than likely him implying that Gojo is inferior to Kakashi, at least in terms of their powers. Whether this is DMS Kakashi, Boruto Kakashi, or just normal War Arc Kakashi is debatable. I'd argue it's more than likely DMS Kakashi, as DMS Kakashi, like I said, fights a dimension-busting god, basically, and has a lot of things that could potentially counter Gojo, like Kamui spam and things like that. And it's also him at his strongest at the end of Naruto Shippuden, whereas War Arc Kakashi would just sort of be like a random middleman Kakashi to decide. It's kind of arbitrary. And Boruto Kakashi we haven't seen the full abilities of. Either that, or Akutami is saying Gojo would slam Kakashi on his neck, which would be surprising, to say the least. Not impossible, but surprising. Anyway, thank you for watching.
All right. Minimum 20 bomb. Maximum 10k damage.
In the magazine, because it gets published in a monthly magazine.
Right.
And in the magazine, they had to like, cover up all the drug bits. So like syringe had to be like had a blue on it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's like, I had the whole like cooking up the drugs. Like, you can't do that. Because like the cops are already kind of tough on Eromanga.
Yeah.
And they don't want like more pressure.
Right. Because it was certainly rare to see like drug use in just like even Eromanga or like manga in general, and it was such a heavy theme, which I think is like super rare to see, in any kind of media that comes out from Japan.
I think in seinen manga you see some drug use, like Ushijima-kun or something.
Yeah.
But in hentai it's mostly like, I don't know what it is. Right now it's like
it's like aphrodisiacs.
Aphrodisiacs, like hypnosis apps and stuff.
Yeah, the smartphone app. Yeah, the smartphone app. You are now horny. See, again, I didn't know anything about you. The only work I'd read was Metamorphosis, and I guess I didn't know when they were like, "Oh, Shindell's coming on." I'm like, "Oh, does Shindell speak English?" I didn't even know. Right? I didn't know anything. I guess when you made Metamorphosis, do you find that your experiences from like because you were raised in the US, right?
Yeah.
Does that have a lot of effect on how you write manga, or is it still very like Japanese?
I don't know. I think because I've been told that it's not Japanese-ish,
right.
like my storytelling, but I tried to make it Japanese.
Yeah.
And I don't know if my experiences in New York really helped me.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of fucked up stuff.
I've seen a lot of fucked up shit, but like, I try not to like directly put that into my storytelling. It would kind of be like alien to most Japanese readers.
I'm just projecting all the Florida Man stuff I've seen. You've seen a Florida Man thing, right? That's got to be in one of them.
I mean, I'm sure that's also the case, considering that I think like for a lot of Japanese people, New York is kind of like seen in this like glory light type of like, New York, wow, like how
like glitzy New York or like 80s New York where it's like you
get
like
everyone gives a shit. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god, just Metamorphosis, man. Did you expect it to be as like big? And,
I didn't expect it to be like so meany.
I knew of the image of her wearing the glasses. As an anime fan, there's some images that are like almost iconic.
Yeah.
And one of them is the girl with the glasses.
Right,
like, oh, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah. Did you like when you released it? Was it something that immediately got like picked up by the community, or was it something that you released and you had the usual reaction, and then over time it just blew up in popularity?
It was an overtime thing because like when it was in the magazines, it was because the editors didn't want to put it up front because it's kind of like shady.
Yeah.
So it was always at the back.
Oh, damn. Trying to push it under the rug.
So it was kind of low key for a while until like people I think online just picked it up. And started memeing on it.
Yeah, because I remember when I interviewed you like 3 or 4 years ago, I asked like if you know like the memes, and you were like, oh yeah, I'm very up to date on the memes. Because it's just like I don't know, like do you think like the memes like kind of take away from like the message that you were like trying to portray in Metamorphosis, or do you think just like kind of just like no, I enjoy the memes, it's whatever.
The memes fine. I mean, I don't really I don't think about putting out a message when I make a story.
Right.
Just what you want to talk about. Or
I mean, like I just wanted to make it entertaining first and foremost.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of
entertained. That's something.
Well, contrast is entertaining.
But I think though, like regardless, I think like a lot of people read Metamorphosis and was like, there's some hidden message here. There's like some kind of like deeper meaning like to this like story, because it's just so different to the standard doujins you would read, right? Like the normal doujin is just like boy meets girl, boy fucks girl. Yeah, that's kind of it. I
mean, I would say like out of every era doujin I've seen or era manga, like I was probably like the most invested in any like story as I was in. I wasn't as invested in any other story as I was in Metamorphosis in terms of just seeing the characters develop in the development that you gave them, and just every like a lot of things outside of just the hentai scenes and the sex scenes and everything. I was probably invested in the characters and the ending, and that also made me even more invested in the area scenes as well. I thought that was like fantastic. I don't know how much of it was planned on your ends, but it was absolutely incredible.
Well, as long as there's like a seed of a story in there, I think people pick up on it.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of hentai, I think, especially since maybe early 2000s, they've been streamlining it to make it more like I don't know, fappable.
Yeah, like they just jump straight into the fucking, and I was like, come on, guys. Like
there are some doujins I've read where I'm like, I feel like I've skipped like 5 pages. Because there's no build up.
Yeah, when I open a doujin, it's like page 2 or like even page 1.
Page 1.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, page 1 and they're already fucking. I'm like, whoa, chill out. Ease me into this shit. God damn. Like,
I'll take that over the hentai that start with like 3 minutes of text explaining the story. Who thought that was a good idea?
No, but like some people are super into that, right? It's like, yeah, they are. Like,
what? It's just like Star Wars text on the screen.
Some movies that start out with monologues.
Yeah.
It's the same people who enjoy the interview sections at the start of porn, right? Like, they want to like get into the story beforehand. It's like I want to feel invested in this.
Yeah, I've noticed another trend that's I've seen a lot of era manga recently, or not even recently. It's like like when they say the most important part of a YouTube video is the first 14 seconds. So like there's some era manga that start off with just like the fucking for like the first 3 pages, and then it goes to the story. Like you gotta hook the viewers.
Yeah, it's always like page 1 they're fucking, and then it's like this is how it happened.
There's like an era manga algorithm.
AI generated. So I'm very interested to know so you lived in New York, right? How do you then go from living in New York to being like, I'm going to start drawing era manga in Japan? Like how is that a transition that happens?
Well, I've always been drawing.
Right.
So like, and when you're a kid, you're like, I want to grow up and I just want to draw, right? And after college, I'm like, okay, how do I do that?
Right.
I'm like, I could start in the US, but then there's the comics industry, and it's kind of like it's kind of a it's never, you know what I'm saying? You have to do this sort of work.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to like branch off, it's like really minor. It's like super underground.
Yeah.
It's like a furry porn section, but it's like
Saving money, right?
They're loaded.
Browse DeviantArt.
But Japan, it's like this huge, and like back then, like mid 2000s, there was hardly any download like manga.
Yeah.
There's like DL site maybe, and that's about it. So I'm like, that's a low bar too.
Yeah.
Upload stuff and like, start it, like, fuck.
Yeah.
It's great.
I mean, I guess it was like the closest to having like an independent scene where you could just easily upload and just, kind of get your work out there instead of like having to go through like so many publishers and getting picked up and stuff like that.
And I guess like a good way to like grow organically as well, right? Because like those kinds of works are just spread by word of mouth.
Yeah.
So you're always able to speak Japanese, is it?
Oh, I had to work on it. I mean, I spoke it,
Yeah.
but I couldn't like read or write too well.
Oh,
So it's,
okay.
and if you ever saw those like, I don't know, if you've read like a bad translation, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's like bad translation.
Yeah, I have to work, so I spent a lot of time like just playing video games, and reading novels and stuff.
Just research.
It helped me out,
Yeah.
So you were doing it. Have you always been self-published, or did you come to Japan
I
self-published?
came to Japan self-published, and then like a publisher like picked up on it.
okay.
And it's like, hey, you want to go on a magazine? Sure, why not?
Oh, awesome. So like, why did you choose to be like on the aero side of things then?
Well, I've always been interested in the aero side. That's
Well, how did you get into the aero side?
Yeah.
Because I feel like every like aero manga artist always like kind of the beginnings are always different.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, my beginnings were like I think my first doujin was Planet of the Apes.
No.
Aero manga parody.
Okay. Wait. What made you want to do it? Like Caesar?
Yeah, like Dr. Zaius.
I want to read that now. Oh my god. Wait, so like how did that idea come about? You're just like watching Planet of the Apes one day and you're like, I can make this hotter.
I remember seeing a porno that was like Planet of the Apes.
No.
Like back when I was like a teenager, right? And I'm like, it just stuck in my head.
Yeah, I bet.
I was like, what the fuck was that? And like, it was like just eating away at me. And I was like, I have to draw this. And like, I just that out.
Oh my god.
Planet of the Apes.
That's probably what it was called. It's inaccurate. Did it do well? Did people
Oh,
like
it did not do well.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's kind of furry, but like,
It was
yeah.
comic and I sold like 70 copies.
I mean, I'm surprised there's an audience. If you ask me how people like think would buy kind of
That's 70 more people than I thought it was going to be. Jesus Christ.
I printed like 1,000 copies. Right?
Oh, Jesus.
I was gonna like print like 100, but then it's like if you're gonna print 100, it only costs like so much more to print 1,000.
So what happened to these copies? Where are they?
I started like they stuck with me for a while. And like, every time I go to a comic, I just like put a little bit out.
Oh, okay.
So after like 10, 12 years, like I finally got rid of all my back.
Genius recycling.
Now it's just like a rare item now.
Yeah.
I'm fucking kidding. I want this, man. Fuck it. That sounds incredible.
It's like a bonus item, man. Probably get it now.
So how old are you when you drew this Planet of the Apes?
Oh my god, like 20 something.
No.
20,
no.
It's just such a bizarre start.
That's the most bizarre origin story I've ever heard. Planet of the Apes. That sounds like a meme. Like, tell me how you got into hentai. Oh, Planet of the Apes.
So there's this movie called Planet of the Apes, right? Jesus.
So after Planet of the Apes, what came next?
I mean, after that, it's pretty standard. There's a Dragon Quest.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Which is,
I've seen that one.
the Japanese favorite. Yeah, and that's when my first editor came to me and like, hey, this would be nice.
Right. Yeah, like I gotta ask, like as an aero artist, how do you choose which, aside from your original work, how do you decide to choose which works to draw porn about? I guess, like, do you go with like the algorithm to be like, okay, there's like a bunch of this is hot commodity right now, or do you just go with whatever you're a fan of?
I think like my primary motivation is like drawing stuff that I want to read, but isn't available.
Okay.
It's like if someone drew it, I wouldn't draw it all.
Yeah.
It's literally the fuck it, I'll do it myself.
Well, I imagine the Planet of the Apes dojo.
There wasn't much of a market there.
You are the market.
I'll create the market myself. That's awesome.
You found like the 70 people that wanted to play the Apes
And
when it
even
came
with
out.
Dragon Quest, like there wasn't anything that I found like satisfying enough.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to do myself.
Oh, awesome. Like, how do you develop the skills to draw H manga and aero manga specifically? Because did you have to do a lot of practice or
A lot of research.
research?
Research, wink, wink. Like, did you go to like art school and stuff
I
like
did
that?
major in art in college.
Okay.
Right.
So there's that, but it doesn't really help.
Right.
I mean, like, you learn anatomy and like how to paint, how to like.
I mean, I'd argue anatomy is quite important in aero manga.
But, you don't really need it.
Yeah, but I'm like, what I'm saying is like, you don't really see aero manga in the style of like Baki, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it's usually more so than anything. Like you read the Kama Sutra and you're like, okay, I think I kind of figured out like basic anatomy, like basic like positions and stuff
I
like
think
that.
the video is more important than anatomy.
Damn, that's why it's right there. Put that, I want to put that on a t-shirt. Put that on a t-shirt.
Because you see some artists and hips don't go that wide, or like boobs don't go that big.
That's true.
But it doesn't matter because that's what he's into.
Yeah.
Like, how much do you like to stay, I guess, true to what am I trying to say? Like,
The human physique.
true to the human physique.
Oh, like I have my own preferences, but like I try to expand them whenever I can.
Yeah.
I'd say your style is definitely more rooted in reality than a lot of artists I've seen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's a wide variety.
Yeah.
Like there's a very wide range about how artists see the human anatomy,
Right.
especially in doujin. Oh my god.
like some artists, I'm just like, have you ever seen a human in your life? Like, that is not what humans look like.
That's what they want.
That's what they want, though. That's what they want, man. That's what they want. Oh my god. Yeah, I think obviously Metamorphosis, is one of your biggest series, but like you've had like a couple of other like long form ones as well, right? Like TSF, I think. TSF Monogatari is a big one. There's also the Dragon Ball one I read of yours.
Oh, you read the
Broly one, yeah.
That was I've not read that one.
Yeah, you read Broly.
The new Broly movie.
I mean, dojo.
I mean, dojo.
Well, that's definitely kind of the Apes.
Yeah, that's pretty mainstream.
Yeah, well, the first one, the personality's there, but the first one,
That was a training arc. To draw Dragon Ball doujin.
Yeah, the Broly one's sick. I love the
Yeah,
Broly
it's
one.
awesome, right?
Yeah, it's really wholesome. It's just like Broly being like, oh, there's this thing called sex, and I need some help with it.
Plus, he's like literally a 40-year-old version, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's literally like the 4-year-old version of Dragon Ball universe.
He just fucks everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he knows, yeah.
He will expect.
Because like in the doujin, he like discovers what a boner is for the first time, and he's like, "What is this? I don't know what this is. Help! I'm scared. It's like, what do I do? It hurts."
Gives him a boner initially.
I think it was the Chilai.
Chilai.
Remember Chilai? The green skin girl.
Yeah.
I think like, she was masturbating and like they were like the
Midnight
guys
Peaks.
were what is she doing? What's happening?
Oh my god.
He literally had that reaction of like when you discover porn for the first time. He's like, what's going on? What's going on in my pants? What the hell? Yeah, what?
World domination.
Yeah, what is this in my pants?
Oh my god.
So yeah, I gotta ask, what's your creative process around coming up with like the different concepts of different works and everything like that? Do you have one, or is it just sometimes an idea just comes and you just start drawing?
Well, sometimes I see a work of art and I'm like a movie or a novel or something that I'm reading. And I'm like, if there were only more sex scenes in this.
I think we're having different experiences watching Planet of the Apes.
I guess that's how like.
Sorry, Mark. That's the best thing. That's genuinely the best thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I guess that's how like Metamorphosis happened, right? Like you're probably watching like Requiem for a Dream, something similar, and you're like,
This after asking is way too short.
I need more of this, please.
I want to see your arm getting chopped off or
Nah.
someone's mother. You're going insane. We want the ass.
The ass, more ass.
More that. Which now that I think about it, it basically just was the storyline of the main heroine, right?
Yeah,
Of, Dream. Holy shit! I'm just like, just connect that together.
How many pages was Metamorphosis again?
250 something, I think.
Right, it's quite long, right? How long would something like that take? Because I mean, like, it's obviously
I-
reading it. It's like, I can do this kind of fast.
I do like pretty long chapters, like 40, 50 page chapters. So like,
I mean, that was released monthly, right?
Yeah, it's
yeah.
yeah.
So how many months was that? Like a
it's
year?
like maybe like 6 months of storyline.
Damn.
Wow,
Which
that's
is
crazy.
And like I didn't do it every month. I did like one every other month.
Oh yeah, right.
Because each chapter takes maybe like a few hundred hours of work.
Jeez.
Right.
Hello lads, it's your boy, Joey, here to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Honey. Call me a millennial, call me a zoomer, but I like shopping online. And one of the benefits of shopping online is that you can input all sorts of promo codes. But every time I shop online, that promo code field just taunts me. If only I could fill it up with some coupon codes to save me some money. Thankfully though, Honey is here to save the day. Thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. Honey's the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best ones it finds to your cart. Okay, the boys aren't here to back me up, so you be the boys this time, alright? Just imagine you're shopping online, and when you check out, the Honey button appears, and all you have to do is click apply coupons. Wait a few seconds as Honey searches for coupons, you can find that key.
So like then, so what's like a day in the life of an
It depends how much work you have. If
Right,
you're doing like a serialized manga, then you wake up, you go to sleep,
right.
and you do that for like maybe a month.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Do you have like assistants and stuff like that?
When I did Metamorphosis, I had two assistants.
Oh,
Like most of the homework.
Right.
Okay. Is your office at your home, or do you have like a dedicated office where you go to draw?
It was at my home, so
Oh,
like my
okay.
living room was like desks lined
Oh,
up. Yeah.
And you have to make room for two other assistants on top of that. Oh wow.
It's like on the floor. It's like just tiny tones out. That's just like my image of like these kinds of like small like manga studios and stuff like that. Like the assistants are on the floor.
You've seen them before.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
How often do you like get to work on serialized work? Because I imagine you just said it takes a lot of work. So
like whenever I want to.
Whenever you want to,
like,
yeah.
You know, after my first tankobon, what do you call it?
Like volume.
Volume.
Yeah.
Pokemon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First whatever book.
Yeah.
After my first book came out, and it sells pretty well, then people start giving you, like asking you to do work.
Right.
And after you gain a little bit of notoriety, then you don't really have any trouble finding work.
Yeah.
As long as you want to work, you can.
Oh, okay.
So that I've been lucky in that sense.
So you just go on your own schedule.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm sure you got quite a bit of notoriety as well, like after Metamorphosis, right?
Actually, like, I think my first two like gave me like the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it name value?
Oh,
Is that including the Planet of the Apes?
No, my first two like
Oh, books. Oh, okay, I was about to say. I was like,
Sarashii and TS Monogatari.
you're right.
Like my first two like published books. Yeah.
I've always been curious because obviously Metamorphosis has been very like memed up in the Western anime community.
Right.
What's the Japanese side of things? Like how's your Japanese audience reacted to your work? And
I think Japanese audience finds my work kind of like weird. Because like my stuff is a bit different than like the mainstream like.
yeah,
hentai.
it definitely is. Yeah, in a good way. I
I mean,
feel,
it's more story driven, I think.
Yeah,
definitely.
So like people but I just keep trying to put like a lot of like hentai in there to
Yeah.
like make it work.
Attention, guys.
Yeah. So I mean like I think in the Japanese market my most best seller is still my first one.
Right.
Well, that's because it's been out long.
Yeah,
longer.
yeah.
So the reaction from the Western and Japanese audience of Metamorphosis was like really different.
Yeah, it's not in Davis.
Wow. Okay.
That's interesting.
How do you balance like the amount of story you put in a work versus the amount of sex you put in?
Yeah. Was I supposed to factor Metamorphosis?
Genuine question.
I was reading it and I'm like, when would I?
Maybe the first three chapters.
That's the only point where I felt like,
The karaoke scene probably was like the best optimal point.
After that,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's like I don't know how much people need the incredible Mr. Incredible, which gets more
sad, yeah.
It becomes uncanny.
That one was very confusing. I'm like, is this more story or more porn? I couldn't really.
Right.
Or was it just
Yeah.
like, or do you not see it as that? It's just like it is a story that has porn in it. You can do what you
I
want.
think that's the most optimal way of having a story with sex in it.
Yeah.
Because like if you have like a hentai and it's like there's a story part for the first 5 pages and then like the next 20 pages is sex. What the hell was that?
Was you- was you-
Oh, that was me. Oh. I don't know why Google thought we said Google, but
So like if there's like a story part for 5 pages and like 20 pages of sex, then you can skip the story part. Can't you? So
Mm.
then just read the story and read the sex and you're like, and you're done.
yeah.
Right.
So is it more that you can't in Japan you can't draw stories that have a lot of sex in them without it being labeled as like an ero manga? Like, would you say you're trying to draw more stories and trying to draw sex and fat too in a way?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's sexier if there's a story.
Right.
Yes.
So it
I agree with that.
yes.
Okay.
So like your biggest challenge is not putting story in your work, but it's incorporating it in a way
Like
that
the
makes
sex should be an integral part of the story, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Someone gets it. Thank you. That's why you're the legend.
It's like the goat.
Yeah. Because like, you read some hentai manga and there is a very like clear distinction between here's the story part and here's the sex part.
Metamorphosis didn't feel like a porn thing for me.
Yeah.
It felt like a really dark story and very adult.
Yeah.
I think that's why it drew so many people in, though, right? Because like they're probably going into it expecting it to be like 5 pages of story, 20 pages of sex scenes, and then you're like, hold on a second.
But I'm just wondering now because it made me think like, does Japan have like if it has X amount of sex in it, would they just automatically put it in the porn?
Yeah.
Even if the story is very fleshed out and very.
I think there's no clear cut line
Right,
between
right.
like porn and like a story with sex in it because you see a lot of seinen manga with a decent amount of sex in it.
Yeah,
True.
I think it depends on like just how much you're showing, right? Probably.
I guess so, yeah.
Because like a lot of like seinen manga and like sex scenes and stuff like that, it's usually like you only see like the top half, or like it's like
Moaning faces.
Yeah, it's like a moaning phase.
Fade out
Yeah, it's like it's like completely whited out or whatever.